This is a third presentation in what we hope to be a regular series of informational webinars presented by the City of Knoxville's Tree Board in cooperation with Trees Knoxville. And this month, we have another partner, Ijams Nature Center, and they're, well, I guess she's got several titles. One is Weed Warrior, AmeriCorps volunteer, and maybe one other I saw, but I can't remember. But anyway, our presenter this week, or this month, is Cele Weakfall, and take it away.
Thank you all for having me here. So essentially, this presentation is going to be about a couple different things, mainly invasive plants, and one being why they're an issue and why we're having this talk in the first place, and what benefits we gain and our environment gains from removing them, and how to remove them, and essentially what you can put in place once you remove them. So what makes a plant invasive? Essentially, there's a difference between a plant that is not from here and a plant that is not from here that thrives in its environment. The key word that makes it invasive is that it becomes so aggressive that it takes over and can turn into an infestation, and will damage the landscape by becoming essentially the only plant that's growing in that area, making that a monoculture where diversity is lacking, and that creates a very unhealthy landscape. And it becomes such an issue. These plants are problematic because they have several different means of gaining that upper hand, right? The difference between our native plants and these plants are how aggressively they grow, and they're able to do that with vast seed dispersal. So these plants aren't just popping up via berries and wildlife. They also have roots that are incredibly aggressive, and they'll resprout if you're not careful. And they're also keeping their leaves. When all of our other natives have gone dormant throughout the season, they are alive and well and thriving, and they're able to do that because they are so hardy to the elements. Why is it that we want to remove these plants? They are going to create an environment which we have multiple different species of natives, and that's going to increase the wildlife. That's going to improve the availability of sunlight and nutrients and space, and overall everything is going to be a lot healthier in that area once an invasive is gone. So the main course right here is the detection and prevention. And in order to be able to detect and prevent these things, you have to be able to ID them. And in order to ID them, there's just a couple characteristics that I'm going to run through with each of these invasives listed on the left. We're going to go through bush honeysuckle, privet, ivy, and winter creeper. And those are a lot of what we spend our time on at Ijams. There are others, there's so many, but these are usually the top four. And our methods are split between natural methods and chemical methods. And natural methods being we remove them by hand or a weed wrench. And those are usually for the younger, smaller invasives. And then there are other methods that we employ when there's a more mature invasive, like cut stump, for example, on a woody invasive. That's something that we'll use with privet. We'll cut it down with a handsaw and then treat the stump with a herbicide that has a dye in it, so we can see what we've treated and so we don't waste as well. And then we also have a foliar spray, which is more than likely going to be for English ivy or something like kudzu, something that requires a wider range, because we could be there all day hand pulling. The nature of the beast is that these things are aggressive, and so sometimes we have to use herbicide for an infestation, because that's essentially what we have at Ijams. We missed the bus of not having an infestation a very long time ago, and so the key being catching these things very early. And if you'll hit the next slide, we'll talk about what bush honeysuckle looks like, everybody. Okay, so bush honeysuckle. The key to identifying bush honeysuckle, it has a couple different distinguishing features. It's oval. It's got a teardrop shaped leaf. When you look into a forest, like if you're on your way to work or just in your car driving, you will see this stuff everywhere. You can see it mainly, everything else being dormant right now, so it pops out. Its lime green leaves are definitely eye-catching, and birds love its red berries. They love to help us spread it, and it has an arching sort of bark that's tan, and it can be light brown, and it looks as though a cat has scratched it. And it starts out with several different shoots, and so it can be tricky to remove once it's mature. But that's something that also resprouts its roots if you're not able to get all of the root system out. That's something that herbicide might have to come into play with. And it has the red berries that pop up in September, like I said, and yeah, that's bush honeysuckle leaf. So Chinese privet. So Chinese privet is also like bush honeysuckle, that it's woody and it's got more of a bark than say something like ivy, where it would be a vine. But it has bright green berries. Well, they start out bright green and they'll turn usually like a purple, brown, or black. And it has opposite oval leaves, and it often looks stringy. Like you can see that in the far left picture. When it grows, it's not growing just in one direction. It's very like wispy, if you will. And its flowers are going to bloom in late spring. And this is also going to be something that you can distinguish between an invasive and a native right now, being that we're into winter. You'll still be able to see these with its leaves. Some of them are dropping their leaves, but the majority of them aren't right now. So winter creeper is probably one of my favorites, being that it's easy to pull. It's easy to remove. Again, catching it when it's young is key, because once this stuff gets going, it loves to cover the forest floor. If it can't climb into the top of a tree, it's definitely an aggressive invasive. It has oval opposite leaves that are glossy with a light green vein, and it's sort of serrated. It's hard to tell, but once you get closer to them, you can see that. And its little seed capsules look like, if they take over a tree, it looks almost as if it is a tree, because it will reach out and branch out once it doesn't have anywhere else to go. And yeah, that's winter creeper. And that would be something that we would more than likely hand pull or treat with a foliar spray, because it is. But that's on a level at Ijams that has become an infestation. In your backyard, that's something that hopefully is young enough and small enough that you don't that you can easily hand pull it and remove it. Perfect. So English ivy was introduced as an ornamental, believe it or not. They said, this reminds us of home. And I think the early 1800s, England was like, we'll just bring this stuff over in boatloads because we love it. And now it's everywhere. And it's got a palmate leaf. So it can also change shape to get, if the leaf is in full sun, it might look a little different and not be as pointed. And it will essentially just be a singular leaf, and it's dark green, glossy, and got a light green vein, just sort of like winter creeper. And it loves to take over everything, just like the rest of these guys. Yeah, and that's English ivy. So if you'll hit so once you remove these invasives out of your yard, ideally you'd like to plant a native in place of it, because your yard would look naked, and you're like, well, that bush honeysuckle looks really pretty. What do I put in place of it? American beautyberry is a great option. That's the picture on the top left. It's sort of hedge-like and grows similar to bush honeysuckle, but less dense. And our native birds love it. And oak leaf hydrangea is another great option, and that's at the bottom left. And those are absolutely beautiful well into the fall. And crossvine is on the top right, and that's also a native replacement for something like, say, winter creeper, because it is a vine, and our pollinators love crossvine, and it's gorgeous, so you can't beat that. And there's also hearts of bustin, spice bush is another native that we love, and coralberry. But there's so many natives that you can replace rather than invasives, flourishing in your yard, like that person that planted Chinese privet. Don't be that person. But yeah, I think if you'll just hit the next slide for me, I think this is, yeah, that does it.
If anyone has any questions.
Question. You talked about a weed wrench. Could you talk a little bit more about how those things work and what type of situations you use them in?
Sure. A weed wrench is probably my favorite tool on the planet. So it's essentially like a pry bar, but it has legs and a hinge that attaches to a jaw that will grab around the base of something like bush honeysuckle. You'd want to use it on woodies, things that are a little more mature that you can't pull out by hand. And the great thing about a weed wrench is that you can put your body weight into the pry bar that stands up, and it will push the base into the ground and help pry the plant out, and it'll help you get the entire root system out, because that's definitely something you want to do so it doesn't resprout. And they come in all different sizes. I think I'm sure you can buy them online. Yeah. Does that answer your question, I hope?
Yeah. I've seen them in use. I've never actually used one myself, but I was just wondering, what the better, obviously they're better for certain situations than others. That's really what I was trying to get at. So I have a lot of privet and a lot of bush honeysuckle, and I'm thinking about different ways, because you got to get all that stuff out by the roots, or it's going to come back, and or spray it if you cut it down. So go ahead.
There's a great program that we have at Ijams that allows you to come and rent a weed wrench. So if you wanted to get started on that privet and bush honeysuckle, we'd be more than happy to rent that out to you too, because those things are great for getting privet and bush honeysuckle out. In fact, that's what we use more than anything on privet bush honeysuckle.
So I've been looking for, can you hear me?
Go ahead, Tim.
I've been looking for a weed wrench for years, and I really couldn't find anything online. So if you find any source, I would love to find out about it. I've even asked around Knoxville at various small hardware stores, and I haven't been able to find any. But I'll definitely take you up on renting one this year.
Ben says they're for loan. Do you loan them, or do you charge for them, or are they just are they free?
We just loan them out to you. You just sign them out and then return them done. But I think they have another name. Ben might be the person to ask. I'm not exactly sure what the other name for I think it's like a something I can't remember, but
Polar bear.
It's called the uprooter.
Uprooter.
Oh, okay.
So if you type that in online, it might have more information than a weed wrench would, per se.
Nash Copeland says there's another thing called the polar bear.
Yeah, that's a Canadian company, I think, and it's a polar bear. They also have a couple different sizes.
Yeah, I've seen those things in action.
On a lot of different things, especially small trees. If you have hackberries that seem to get everywhere in your flower beds. They're very good to get on those small trees and be able to pull them out. You need to do it when the soil is moist. When the soil's dry, you can't get all the roots. It'll just break them off. I've been more successful with honeysuckle than I have been with privet. I pulled out a whole bunch of privet one time and it all came back. So kind of disheartening, but the weed wrench is an excellent tool. The one I've got came from somewhere in the Northwest, maybe Washington State. The fellow that made those quit for a while, but I think he's back in business again. So if you Google it, you may find it under the name Weed Wrench.
Somebody's asking, who do they contact for the weed wrench rental? Say that 3 times. I assume you just get a hold of somebody at Ijams. Is that correct? For the rental program, whatever you want to call it.
If I'm not mistaken, you would contact Ben for renting a weed wrench, I believe.
And Lee Rumble's asking, what is your preferred RTU cut stump herbicide?
That RTU, so that would be a question, I believe. Oh, ready to use. Okay. So we use, and we'll use triclopyr on privet or bush honeysuckle, or mainly all of our invasives other than kudzu, and that's not a cut stump. Well, actually, it is a cut stump treatment, and we'll use Transline for that. And it's called triclopyr 2, if I'm not mistaken. And Transline was the other one. And the brand name that we use for triclopyr is Garlon. If
Say that again, please.
the brand, so triclopyr, I believe, is the makeup of herbicide, and Garlon is the brand name.
You guys normally, when you do use herbicides on cut stumps, is it imperative to put that stuff on while the thing is still green, or does it matter?
So what we do is essentially immediately after we cut it, we treat it, because there is a time period that the plant will not soak the herbicide down to its root systems and won't kill all of the plant. And so I believe it's somewhere around like 20 seconds. So it's rather fast that you want to treat it, but it doesn't, if you're asking about like what season to treat it in, you can treat it year round.
I was
Before it's below freezing, and not before rain, because you want enough time for it to soak up and not be diluted.
I was talking about when you're cutting it, no matter what time of the year. I didn't realize it was that quick, but I figured it was that you needed to get it on there pretty quick before it started scabbing over, or whatever they do, whatever the technical term for it is. I don't know.
Yeah, as long as it's below freezing, you should be able to treat it, if I'm not mistaken.
Do you have any other questions in the chat?
I have a question actually. So how in relation to your strategy for combating invasives at Ijams in particular, what's the technique or the strategy for the super huge areas of infestation, like Burnett's and some of the quarry areas with the English ivy and all that kind of stuff. Is like a controlled burn, would that do the trick, or is that on the table, or because man, you guys have some super big challenges as far as that's concerned, that I've seen
Talked
over
about
the years.
We've talked about controlled burns before, Andy, and they're apparently pretty hard to do inside the city limits. It
Oh
takes a lot.
yeah, I'm kind of saying that in jest, but gosh, it seems like that would be the only thing that would take on some of those. I know there's a couple places up on the Burnett Ridges that are just super thick. It's just nothing but ivy.
Had some success with, I have about 7 or 8 acres out here, and it was, the understory was whatever you name an invasive, it was there, but it was primarily privet honeysuckle. And I just rented one of those brush cutter attachments that goes on front of a bobcat. And those things they'll cut down a tree, a 3-inch tree. You don't want to do that on a regular basis with it, but the privet and honeysuckle and all that stuff. I even got into, some of the kudzu and got it knocked back. Of course, it didn't stay knocked back, but as far as cutting it down, again, that's not uprooting it. So you'd have to treat it, or you'd have to do it repeatedly. I mean, I don't have it as bad as some of that stuff that you're talking about, but a lot of it, at least you can get a jump on it that way, if you're going to treat, if you're going to spray it, or whatever, but do small patches, but, the mechanical advantage there is pretty great. And on a scale like that, it's probably about the only thing you could even try, I would think, unless the Ijams folks have a better.
Yeah, Andy, I'm just going to jump in here. That's a great question.
Yeah.
The way that we prioritize things at Ijams is based on where we can have the biggest impact. So we're managing 318 acres with 4 employees and a lot of volunteer hustle. So we have to kind of decide where we can have the biggest impact, and we've mapped out our parcels and where we have. Actually, it's more a matter of where you have the least amount of infestation is where you want to have your biggest impact, because generally those parts of the property have the best resiliency in terms of coming back. So they generally have a little more intact seed bank. They have more native cover there whenever you remove the invasives. So we want to give the spaces that are the healthiest in our forest the best opportunity to rebound from removal efforts. So some of the spaces in our domain are just completely outside of the realm of what we can tackle as a team. So we have to kind of, resign ourselves to the fact that certain spots in the park just might not get cleared unless we get a lot of backing or some major funder that can help us tackle that. Because financially, it's just too much for us to handle.
Yeah, it's just astounding at the scale, or the extent that it can go. Because I've been there for, I've been in South Knoxville for about 12 years now, and just over the course of my observations, it's just amazing. But it's really, by contrast, it's neat to see the places that aren't, because, there's some really nice diversity of plant life and et cetera, whenever it's not just, beat down by invasives. So when you guys go in and clear an area, do natives automatically kind of move in without the competition, or do you guys have to spur that activity?
It's a bit of both. It depends on the site. Some sites, like I said, are a little bit more what we call intact. And that means they have a greater potential for rebounding. So they've got natives that are already present that are likely to spread, and they maybe have a healthy seed bank. And then there's certain parts of our property that don't have that and have been highly disturbed for a number of years, even centuries in some parts, you know. So some places require a lot more help. We try to give every site that we clear at least a little bit of help. There are native seed mixes out there that are available all over the place. And then the Tennessee Division of Forestry has a great nursery down in Delano, and you can order massive amounts of bare rootstock. I know everybody on here who's on the tree board is familiar with this. So definitely, I encourage you, if you do a removal effort on your own property or in a park nearby or at a church, give it some help and go ahead and spur the effort along by adding some natives in there.
Most definitely. Yeah, thanks. That's great info.
I have a quick question for David Lee, who I see is on this phone call. David, because when we did weed wrangle, and Ijams was also, that's something that Ijams organizes every year, and Trees Knoxville was at, no, that wasn't weed wrangle. That was when we were over at Mabry Hazen House. You had a weed wrench. Where did you get that?
As I said, that was from this Canadian company. I went to look for a weed wrench, but that was the point at which the manufacturer had gone on strike and said he wasn't going to manufacture his product because of government interference. So the only thing that was available at that time was this Canadian product, which got hung up in customs. It's just nobody knew where it was, but it all worked out well. It's a good product. The larger ones, you can get larger trees, but they're also fairly heavy to sling around, and the smaller ones are certainly easier to work with and often very effective too.
Do you remember the name of the Canadian company? And I'm sorry you've already said that, but I might have had something else going on in the background.
Yeah, it's a pun on polar bear, and they named it Puller Bear. So I think Puller bear.
Yeah, and the uprooter is the new name for the weed wrench. So there's a white tool. It looks similar to a weed wrench, and works in the exact same way. So those are currently being manufactured somewhere, I think, up in the Northwest, and they have a variety of sizes available as well.
Could you talk some about trying to treat Virginia creeper with herbicide? What's sort of the collateral damage to it, and what type of herbicide do you use?
I'm assuming you mean winter creeper.
Yes, excuse me. Yeah, winter.
Sure. Yeah, treating winter creeper with herbicides is difficult. It does not respond very well, and it takes a long time for it to react to the herbicide. The way that we have had some success at Ijams is by going through, and generally anytime we do a foliar treatment on an evergreen species, we do it in the dormant season so that we're not affecting any of our non-target plants. So we wait until the dormant season, and then we go through and lightly damage the plant with the plant leaf surface with a string trimmer prior to treating with an herbicide, and that generally helps a little bit. I will say that it's just one of the toughest ones that I've had to fight in the park. And as far as which herbicide, I'm not really I don't know, inclined to promote one over another. I think the one we often use is the triclopyr on the winter creeper.
So I have a question. I have a lot of mahonia all through the woods, and I was wondering if anybody had any experience on getting rid of it, because I've sprayed it and I've cut it, and it seems to just thrive after I spray it. So does anybody have any ideas?
We use a cut stump treatment on mahonia. It does not pull out very well, so we usually cut it and then treat it immediately after with a 20% solution of herbicide.
Okay.
I have a question about getting rid of Japanese honeysuckle vine and pulling it. Is pulling it the best method, or is there any hope?
Pulling works. It's probably one of the best methods. I was talking with a colleague who she works over at ORNL. Some of you might know her, Kitty McCracken, and she manages thousands of acres for ORNL. And she once told me that was her toughest plant to get rid of. And if somebody who's doing it on that scale says that that's their toughest, then kind of we're in for a fight. But if it's a small population, I think hand pulling is probably your best option. For larger vines, a cut stump is sometimes effective. And then it is probably one of those that you could do a foliar treatment and then a burn, depending on the scale of your operation.
And if I could add to that, I've found with that honeysuckle vine, these are all my own words for it, and everyone who's worked with it knows, there's like a mother, I call it the mothership. So the honeysuckle vine goes out and then attaches and then attaches. So you think you're cutting it, but you're not. You kind of have to pull and keep it intact, cut, and then follow it to what I call like the mothership. There's like a big ship. And so you just got to get under there if you can. Like I've ruined so many pruners and things, just a knife, just, plunging them into the soil and cutting off as much as I can. And then by keeping, of course, this is in a small space, and keeping a watchful eye for if anything sprouts up. And I have had luck in eradicating it this way, but it's very, very time consuming. And that's where I've put in the chat box some of the polar bear and the uprooter.com if anyone's interested in looking at that.
Okay, are there more questions? We've got a little bit more time here, actually quite a bit more time. But if we don't need it, we won't use it.
Can't think of anything.
Okay, well, that appears to be it. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and thank you for bearing with us in our technical difficulties. Tracy, thanks for hanging in there and figuring it all out. Thanks to Ijams, you guys at Ijams for organizing this and pulling it off. I really appreciate that. It was very informative. Yeah. And for showing up, everybody for showing up. And we hope to do another one of these next month, but we haven't scheduled anything, nailed anything down yet. So, but we'll be letting you know that there are various information outlets, and you can subscribe to the Trees Knoxville newsletter if you don't already. That's a good source of upcoming tree-related events. And on behalf of City of Knoxville Tree Board and everybody else, thanks again for coming out, and hope to see you next month.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Craig. And I'd like to add as well that this has been recorded, so give me a little bit of time to edit out all our weird stuff, and it'll be up on our YouTube. Trees Knoxville has a YouTube channel, so if you just go to YouTube and put in Trees Knoxville, and we have a bunch of videos in there. So I will have this up on our website, treesknoxville.org, as well as our YouTube page. So I want to thank everyone again for being here. Yeah.
That reminds me, during our Arbor Day session last month or whenever it was, we videoed the different stages of tree planting. So I assume, are those up now, Tracy? Yes. Okay. So there are tree planting how-to videos on Trees Knoxville's YouTube channels if you're interested in learning the finer points of how to plant your trees.
And I spent some extra time editing them. So some of them, I try to add some witty stuff in there and little transitions. So, go ahead and comment and let me know what you think so I can get some feedback on, and even feedback if there's different things you want to see. Like I had a request for crate murder video, like how to properly do a crate, how to do, so we can do a video on that. So if you have any suggestions on videos, instructional videos that you would like to see, you can also email me at treesknoxville@gmail.com. And we're really glad to I think it's just, especially since we're having to do meetings like this, it's a really great way to get information to you. And so, but I need to know what you need to know in order to do that. So thank you.
Well, thanks again, everybody. Good night.